and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Christine Stolzenberg and we are here with you to bring an episode that we call Tea Time with the Happy Homestead Life. What we're going to talk about today is tea. And you might think, why do you need to make a video about tea? You take the bag out of the box, put it in some hot water, and you have tea. Well, that's what I thought too, but there's a whole lot more to tea than that, and it's actually very, very interesting. What we're going to talk about today is 5 different types of actual teas, and then we're going to talk about something called an herbal blend, which is just a little bit different than tea. And what I have for you here are the 5 different teas that we're going to talk about. And ironically enough, even though there are 5 different varieties that we're going to talk about, they all come from this same beautiful little plant. And the name of this plant is called Camellia sinensis. And that is its Latin or botanical name for the tea plant. Now, we're shooting this from northern Michigan, and we really can't grow tea plants outside here in our area because the climate isn't good for them. The tea plant likes warm, moist climates. Now we can recreate that in a greenhouse and grow tea plants, but in order to do mass production, you can see how you would have to have an awful lot of area that was temperature controlled in order to do that. So that's why you don't see a whole lot of tea actually grown and harvested in mass quantities here in North America. Now the first tea that we're going to talk about is going to be white tea. And what white tea is the very early growth, very young, delicate, gentle growth on the leaf, as well as the buds, the tiny buds. So white tea has to have the leaf and the bud in it. And you can see this tea, these leaves are very light in comparison to some other teas, hence the name white tea. And I think we are all familiar with the wonderful health properties of green tea, and we're going to get to green tea here in a little while. But white tea actually has more antioxidant values in it than green tea does. And the reason for that is the way that it is harvested. It's harvested very gently. It's hand-picked. The leaves and the buds are hand-picked off of the plant, and they are allowed to just dry naturally in the shade. So they don't have a whole lot of disturbance. They don't have a whole lot of what's called oxidation, and that's what happens when you take the leaves and you start to handle them or you start to crunch them up. Then that causes oxidation. And 2 things happen when that oxidation occurs. The more oxidation, the more caffeine is allowed to be released, so the higher the caffeine level, and also the less antioxidants that tea contains. So now you can understand why white tea is so low in caffeine, because it's not handled as much, it's not oxidized as much, and why it is so high in antioxidants for that exact same reason. Now white tea, for a cup of white tea, we're looking at about 10 milligrams of caffeine in it. So very low caffeine compared to coffee. Coffee has 180 grams of caffeine in it. I'm just going to turn this hot water on and let that heat up for a little bit while we talk a little bit more about how you brew a good cup of white tea. Now you can use any mechanism you want. We're going to use this teapot here. It's a self-infusing teapot. Now again, because white tea is such a gentle tea leaf, we also want to be very gentle in the temperature of water. If you've ever had a cup of tea and it's kind of turned you off from tea because it's like, this is bitter, it leaves my tongue feeling like the Sahara Desert, it's one of 2 things has happened. You have either steeped it too long and turned it bitter, or you have gotten your water temperature too hot and caused issues there. For white tea, we want to keep our water temperature at about 140 to 150 degrees, so you're not going to want to see a roaring boil. So when people put a tea kettle on and they wait for the tea whistle to go off, that's a little too late because it's already come to a roaring boil. And for our white tea, we want to make sure that it's not there yet. So 2 ways you can do this. I like this glass coffee pot because I can see what's going on with it, and because I know the temperature of what this pot, what it looks like when it gets to temperature. You'll start to see the little bubbles that are coming around here. I know when there's a lot of bubbles accumulating there that it's at about the 140 degree mark. Until you get to that point of knowing what your water looks like and what the relative temperature is of it, you might want to get yourself a little thermometer. You can use candy thermometer. It works real well. You just dip it in every once in a while and kind of see where the temperature is, and then just watch what the bubbles are doing in your teapot. The other thing that you can do is, if you've got an infrared thermometer, if you happen to use thermometers for a lot of things, candy making, canning, those types of things, and then all you have to do is you just put that right at it and pull the little trigger and it'll tell you what it is. This right now is at about 120, and you can start to see the bubbles that are forming in there. So in order to make a cup of tea, we're going to use about a teaspoon, and it can be a little hard to get a teaspoon of white tea because of the way that the leaves are. And you're either going to put that in your infuser, you can get little bags, disposable bags. Those work perfectly fine as well. And I can kind of tell by the way this sounds that we're probably pretty close. And we're right at about 139 degrees. So I'm going to call it good, but you can see all the bubbles that are starting around here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take this off. You're going to pour your hot water in. And for a teaspoon, you're going to use about 8 to 12 ounces. Put your lid back on so you can keep all those nice vapors in there. And then you're just going to let it steep. And you're going to let it steep for about 3 to 5 minutes. And if you're used to a Lipton tea bag, and you know after you've dipped it for a while and you get that nice golden kind of orangish color in there, and you're going to watch your white tea, and you're going to wait, and you're going to wait, and you're going to wait, and you're going to wonder, when is this ever going to turn a darker color? Well, it's not going to, because it does not have all of that oxidation properties to it, so it's not going to give you that deep, rich color that you might be looking for. It's also going to have a very, very light, very gentle flavor to it. It's not going to have a whole lot of flavor. So if you're looking for a tea that you may want to add something to, jasmine works really well added into white tea. Nettles also works very well in white tea, just gives it an extra little bit of flavor in there, so you can add some things in. But we've probably gone just a couple of minutes here. And you can't see a whole lot of change, and you probably won't with your white tea. It's going to stay pretty close to this color here. It may tinge up just a tiny little bit, but it's not going to get a whole lot more color to it than this is. So let's just let this sit for another minute or so, and we'll just kind of recap what we talked about with our white tea. Again, comes from our Camellia sinensis plant. It comes from the most tender new shoots, not these, but there's some little tiny guys in here that you can hardly see. Those and the brand new buds that come out, that's what makes white tea and distinguishes white tea. It is very high in antioxidants and is very low in caffeine. It's got about 10 milligrams of caffeine in a cup versus 180 milligrams of caffeine, which is what you're going to see in coffee. So here we are again, and this is about the color that this is going to stay. So it's all ready to drink. I prefer not to add anything to my tea. Some people will use sweeteners in it, and that's perfectly fine if that's the way you drink your tea. If you drink your tea with milk and honey or milk and sweetener, However you enjoy your cup of tea is the right way for you to drink it. Next, we are going to talk about green tea.